Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is Nick, as always, and today we have a very special guest. We have Cory Doctorow, who is going to introduce himself in a second. But first, I wanted to shill for something. So, as you know, I don't make any money on this podcast. I don't advertise. I don't ask for money anyway. I mostly just do it to bring attention to interesting people. And I meet a lot of interesting people at a local writers group called Meridian Australis. They do a bunch of cool stuff. And so I was with them the other day, and they were joking about how awkward it is for authors to pitch their own work. And I wanted to tell all of you about like one of my favorite fantasy books from a local author here in Melbourne, Will Greatwich. And then I thought it would be funnier if I made Will pitch it himself because it's a lot more awkward for him that way. You can say hi, Will.
Hi.
He's gonna talk to you about this book, The House of the Rain King, for 1 minute, and we're gonna cut to Doctorow. And I really do love this book, and I encourage lots of people to get it. Will, please take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Will Greatwich. I'm an Australian fantasy author, and you should check out my novel House of the Rain King. It's a book about a young monk who has grown up in a monastery worshipping the god of rain. But when the rain god comes back in the flesh, he's not how they expected him to be. He's old, he's senile, he doesn't really know where he is, and that makes him very dangerous to be around. So it's about these monks trapped inside the monastery with their god, and meanwhile, outside, the floodwaters are rising. So it's also about the people of the valley and how they deal with this mythical natural disaster. What makes this book pretty unique is that it has a fantasy setting based on the Australian landscape. So if you are Australian, you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of seeing Australian plants and animals, and especially Australian birds playing a big role in the story. And if you're from overseas, you're going to get a really original fantasy setting that you probably haven't seen before. You can get it in paperback or ebook. The ebook is DRM free if you buy it direct from my website. That's willgreatwich.com, or you can just search House of the Rain King. Cheers.
Cool, thank you, Will. I also like how you left out like a ton of my favorite elements. It's a rad mercenary company. There's my favorite sociopath in maybe any book I've ever read. It's incredible. But yeah, thank you so much, Will.
Thanks.
So, Cory, do you want to introduce yourself to the one person who doesn't know who you are?
Well, I'm a writer and an activist and a journalist. I've worked for the Electronic Frontier Foundation as an activist. I think we're the most important and successful digital rights group in the world, and I've worked there for 25 years all over the world. I was their first European director. I've written more than 30 books. The most recent two are Enshittification and The Reverse Centaur's Guide to Life After AI. And I am Canadian, American, and British, and mostly these days I live in London.
Cool. I didn't actually know you were in London. I thought you were in the US this whole time.
Well, since November, my wife worked for one of the studios in LA, and she quit her job and went to work back at the BBC where she used to work when I met her. She's a Londoner, and so she moved back here, so I followed her. She needs to be back in LA 1 month in 4 for partner meetings. And so when she's in LA, I try to be based there. But where I'm based is very hypothetical because mostly I live in a suitcase.
I've never heard someone describe their location as hypothetical. That's
yeah,
a new one.
Yeah, well, it's like where do I go if I need to like put some more underwear in my suitcase is the city that I live in, but that doesn't mean that I spend much time there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the thing I wanted to talk to you in particular was because you read something I wrote on AI Mania, which my audience will be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking at your commentary at the end of it, it got to something that I'm really interested in, which is not AI specifically. Like what I actually started writing about and got well known in tech for was criticizing management fads and management pathology. You know, just the little inefficiencies that creep in every day and are sort of inexplicable. You know, like a good example is just the massive protest to remote work.
Mm-hmm.
And in most managers, you know, that's not really best seen. Sometimes it's about worker control or capital. A lot of the time, it's just neurosis.
Yeah.
It's like really insecure people who don't know how to go to their colleagues and say, hey, this makes me uncomfortable. Can we talk about this? You know, I'm worried no work will get done. How can I be sure?
Yeah.
They just don't know how to have a discussion. And something I saw that I really liked was you talked about the idea of executives operating the Fisher-Price steering wheel at the business.
Mm-hmm.
Could you run some of the audience through what the Fisher-Price steering wheel is?
Yeah, I'm indebted here to Riley Quinn from Trash Future, who is a font of excellent analogies. So, you know, if you are the boss, You fancy that you're in the driver's seat. But if you don't show up for work, everything will more or less be fine. But if all the people who report to you don't show up for work, nothing is going to happen. And so maybe you're not in the driver's seat. Maybe you're in the back seat with a Fisher-Price steering wheel. But AI and the AI sales pitch is, what if we wire that Fisher-Price steering wheel directly into the car's drivetrain? So you have an idea and you ask a chatbot and it shits out the product. And there is no ego-shattering confrontation with someone who knows how to do something, who explains to you that your idea is impossible or illegal or stupid, or you're all going to go to jail, or it's going to murder people. And it just happens. And, my first inkling of this, because the rest of the time when I'm not in London, I spend my time in LA. We live in Burbank, right near the studios, and I'm a member of one of the Hollywood guilds. I'm a writer in the Animators Guild. And so during the writer's strike, I went out on those picket lines, and I was on the Warner picket line one day, and a writer told me, you give a chatbot notes, or you give a chatbot prompts the same way you give shitty notes to a writer's room, right? Make me ET, but it's about a dog, and put a car chase and a love interest in it, which admittedly is just Air Bud. But if you say that to a writer's room, either tacitly or depending on how bullshit they're feeling explicitly, they will say, why don't you fuck off and make a spreadsheet? People here are making a movie, and that is a thing you assuredly do not know how to do. Go away. And what the chatbot does is it just shits out the script. And the fact that script is almost certainly not producible in any way might not be as important from the perspective of the sales call, and maybe from the perspective of the people investing in the company that makes the chatbot, as the fact that bosses are just infinitely horny for this psychological comfort of engaging in the solipsistic fantasy that other people don't exist. And I think that's the part that I'm interested in about the psychology of AI.
I was actually in psychology for quite a few years before I was in tech specifically, and I did a bunch of improv theater and that sort of thing. And the status dynamic is very deeply built into the lore of improv theater. There's a book by a guy called Keith Johnston. And I didn't know what I was expecting. I didn't know anything about improv when I picked up this book. And it just opens with chapters on status. He was like, that is the dominant thing, when you look at sort of the corporate dynamic. I've had a reader reach out who just teaches improv to, I believe it was lawyers, so that they're better able to manage clients. Because
ending the judge.
Yeah, the judge, clients, all sorts of things, because they just need that.
Right.
But something really interesting when I heard about the Fisher-Price steering wheel is it occurred to me, one of the functions for a long time of having people in the office, presumably so the manager can watch them. But I've realized it is also partially because, companies are highly politicized environments. And by having a lot of your people physically in the office, you have a whole Fisher-Price car. Your presence is not actually necessary, but other executives look at you.
Sure.
And they go, man, look at that car. He's surrounded by 10 people. There's a whole chassis. Look at him walking around turning the wheel as quickly as possible.
That's a very David Graeber bullshit jobs idea that, I forget what he calls that. He's got box tickers and duct tapers. And then I forget what they're called, but it's something basically henchmen or something, right? Just the people where the number of boxes underneath you on the org chart is a marker of how important you are. And I read an amazing book this year. My friend Ada Palmer, who's maybe best known as a science fiction writer outside of academic circles, but in academic circles is a superstar Renaissance historian at the University of Chicago, wrote a historiography of the Renaissance called Inventing the Renaissance. And there's a whole chapter in there about grace and not your entourage, but your the people who answer to you, and how if you're in one of the great families of Florence during the Renaissance, there's just this patronage network of effectively vassals, not formally, but people who depend on you. And,
right.
if the breadwinner in the family, gets kicked to death by a horse, you support them. But also if another great family challenges you, they run into the streets, beating pots and pans and screaming your surname. And literally a mob forms in the streets. Right. And I think there's corporate versions of this where if you have the right vassals around you within the corporate hierarchy when another manager challenges you, right? When they start rat fucking you,
Right.
there is this army of people who will, like, in meetings, in the cafeteria, in emails and memos and whispers, say, you know, my boss has the right of this and wants to do the thing that will make the business billions of dollars. And the other boss, the pretender to the throne who's challenging them, is a you know, an absolutely terrible person who is dooming the company by their greed and short-sightedness. And, you know, I've watched this play out in firms. I had a friend who was on the wrong side of one of these, where they went from like a very senior position to fired with under the threat of civil prosecution for minor paperwork errors, like in a week.
Wow.
It was amazing to see.
Yeah, you see a lot of that stuff in crypto companies. They love pulling coups. They just love shoving everyone out the door, and then like a new guy controls the crypto. When you said that, though, you know, often you hear people say we're moving towards like boring cyberpunk. It is very distressing to hear that we're also in shitty Renaissance already. Like, not even a cool version of it.
Inventing the Renaissance is such a good book, and everyone should read it. It completely blew my mind in 1,000 different ways. And just to give you a taste of what an amazing person Ada is, I know this is somewhat to one side of this, but talking about improv and management,
yeah, for sure.
She is famous at the University of Chicago. She has tenure as a Renaissance historian at Chicago, where she specializes in forbidden knowledge during the Inquisitions, heresy, homosexuality, pornography, and so on. And famously, her first year class ends with a 4-week-long LARP in which they reenact the election of the Medici's Pope.
Fascinating.
And everybody gets like a 70-page character briefing that she's written over the course of many years. And they spend 4 weeks wheeling and dealing and stabbing each other in the back and forming alliances. And then there's a fake Gothic cathedral on campus. They take it over. She dresses them in Renaissance drag. She's found through a Google alert for theater companies that are selling their costumes. And they invest a pope. And every year it's different. Even though like 2 of the final candidates are always the same, because there's always going to be like 2 people from the great families in there, but the power blocks that support them and who emerges victorious is always different. And so like what's going to happen next is always different. And this is her way of teaching students that history is contingent, and that there are, like, as much as there are great forces of history, they're not dispositive. They're entirely like they may form the envelope of possibilities within which humans can act, but they are subject to human agency. It's such an amazing thing. And the book ends with a description of why she does this and how it works. And yeah, it's a good book. It's called Inventing the Renaissance. She's also a librettist and singer. If you want to hear a fucking great opera about the Norse mythos, you should get her Fire and Ice. It's great. And she performs under sassafras.
You got some cool friends. That's fucking rad.
Well, Ada Palmer is like 8 cool friends in one. So yeah.
But yeah, that is fascinating. Right before we recorded, I was talking about, you know, these sort of systems that have been they're being framed as under attack by AI, but are actually pretty degraded before AI got here, right? We're just seeing some of those flaws pop up.
Yeah.
And you describing that university experience just reminded me of mine, where I didn't like get any of that. I had a guy who didn't know how to program, who messed up a bunch of stuff. Like I think his assignments didn't work. They still basically just sold me a visa, right? Like that's what the university is. It's interesting because I found out we have a mutual friend, Jathan from. I heard you're catching him in a couple
at UniMel.
Yeah, I think he's at Monash. Maybe he's
Monash. You're right. Yeah. He switched.
So I studied at Monash, and we were talking about this, and he was saying that Monash has also sort of completely degraded on the AI front. It's actually what prompted the Fisher-Price thing, because he was telling me that the management team there had a great year last year. We recorded an episode for This Machine Kills this morning, so it's not like this is not
great.
Me just like leaking.
Yeah, we should say this
opinions.
is Jathan Sadowski of This Machine Kills podcast, and also a wonderful book called The Luddite and the Mechanic. If you're interested in learning more, yes.
I'm a terrible podcaster and terrible at shilling, so it's very helpful to have.
Right.
But no, that's true. It hadn't even occurred to people who wouldn't know. But yeah, so he was talking about how they had a great year. Last year was like record breaking. This year is still set to be good, but it's not record breaking. And the narrative internally has been that last year was record breaking because they embraced AI. And in Australia, universities are very much powered by international student money. And when he told me
Sure,
this
of course.
morning, I was sitting there going, it's got nothing to do with AI, right? It's purely geopolitics beyond control of the vice chancellor.
Yeah. Trump sent a bunch of people to Australia who would have otherwise gone to America.
And that's it. That's the whole thing.
I call him Comrade Trump because of all of the terrible things that he's inadvertently fixing, like convincing the world to stop using oil, convincing the world to stop using the American internet. Like, Trump has done more to convince the world that we need to like stop embracing American tech policies in our domestic policy than like I did in 25 years. And he's done more to convince people to solarize than Greta Thunberg has ever done. He is like, he's doing praxis. It's very weird.
He's crushing it. Maybe this was the plan the whole time.
Just secret agent Trump, Comrade Trump.
Just be as unappealing as possible, as uncharismatic as possible, and that'll get everyone to move off. But it's true. Like a lot of
he's an op.
my friends won't study in the U.S. anymore. Like, if you tell them, like, do you want to head out there? They go, why? I'm going to get like violated at the airport. I'm going to be
shot in the
harassed
face by a chud or sent to a Salvadoran slave labor camp for the rest of my life. Yeah, totally.
It's fucked up. I was meant to do a big U.S. tour because I've got a lot of readers in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And it's literally not safe for me to go. I'm too brown. Wow. It would be unwise for me to head around the States.
Sure. You're a U.S. citizen or naturalized or?
Australian. I'm Australian.
You're an Australian citizen, but you don't sound Australian. You sound.
No. Well, so I was a Malaysian citizen.
Oh,
and I just got my citizenship approved. I'm doing the ceremony in a couple of weeks.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Malaysia's an interesting case because they have renounced all of their treaties with the U.S. and they are now saying that they will not honor any of the policy commitments that they made to the U.S. Specifically, they, along with every other country in the world, have signed up to something called anti-circumvention that makes it illegal to reverse engineer and modify technology if it's designed not to be modified, to change like DRM systems.
Right.
Which is why, there's not a company in Malaysia today that will make you like the universal printer unlocking kit that makes it just for every printer disables their ink checking routine. So that you can use generic ink or refilled cartridges with them, which would be a giant business. I mean, ink is like $10,000 a gallon.
Yeah.
And so, like you could just supply that to everyone. 25, 30 years ago, Malaysia led the world in making deregionalized DVD players. But once it signed up to its U.S. free trade agreement, it promised to criminalize people who reverse engineer DVD players and deregionalize them. And so that became that killed that export sector. It used to be like Malaysian DVD players were the world's, most sought after DVD players because they were all region zero.
Growing up there, it didn't even occur to me that was special. I didn't even know regionalized DVD players existed. I just assumed that. Interesting.
Well,
I've learned something.
Anti-circumvention is a way to effectively invent a law because there's no copyright law that says if you go to Australia and bring home a Blinky Bill DVD and try and play it in Florida, that like you're not allowed to watch it, right? Like you bought the DVD, it's yours, it's your property. But, the sector wants to segment the market and DVDs make it hard to do. In the age of CRTs, it was easy because you had conflicting video standards, PAL and NTSC. DVDs that just goes away, they're multi-output, digital, whatever. And so this business model becomes a law, right? The way anti-circumvention works is once it's illegal to reverse engineer and modify something, then if you make something that enshrines a business model, reverse engineering and modifying the device to frustrate your commercial desires becomes a crime. Jay Freeman calls it felony contempt of business model. And so this is why we've seen the metastasis of these, what are called access controls, DRM, not just in DVD players, but printers, ventilators, cars, tractors, in smart speakers, phones. Obviously, Apple's like single largest line item on the revenue sheet is the $100 billion a year they get from processing transactions for the App Store because you have to use their 30% payment processor for every dollar you collect in their App Store. And it's just illegal to reverse engineer the phone and like make a jailbreaking dongle you can buy in the checkout aisle at Walmart or Spar that jailbreaks your phone and installs a regional app store that charges 3% to the same software vendors and service providers. And so Apple gets to preserve this $100 million market. And that market could be someone else's, right? Australia could go into business like having the most up-to-date jailbreaking toolkits that make sure your phone always works, but is always patched with the latest security patches. And they could export that to the whole world and offer a 90% discount on payment processing and make $10 billion instead of $100 billion, except the US-Australia Free Trade Agreement of 2003 makes it illegal to do that in exchange for tariff-free access to the American market, which is no longer there. To tie this all to AI, because I know this isn't what we signed up to speak about, although this is my special subject.
Yeah, go for it.
Australia is sitting there, along with every other country in the world, having a digital sovereignty crisis. And like the digital sovereignty crisis is fucking real. You know, Trump like shut off Microsoft Office 365 access for foreign officials that made him angry, right? The International Criminal Court, he bricked it for swearing out an arrest warrant for genocide against Netanyahu. The High Court that sentenced Jair Bolsonaro, bricked. Right? You lose your M365, you lose the email address you use to log in everything else, because that's your Outlook address.
Yeah.
You lose all your working files, all your cloud documents, email archives, calendars, address books, everything. You're effectively like kicked off the fucking internet. And he's doing this to foreign governments. He could get up tomorrow and say like, I want Greenland. I'm not going to put tanks in Nuke. I'm just going to shut down Denmark.
I was thinking about this morning because I was chatting with Ed Zitron, who I don't know if you've spoken to.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you have.
I love Ed.
So I was chatting with Ed, and he said something. He revealed some numbers to me, and he went, maybe this spells doom for Microsoft. And I had a real think about it.
I saw that article. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was also thinking about it, and I went, but Microsoft can just like 5x their prices, and everyone has to. I mean, at least for a couple of years, just suck
Locked
it up,
in.
Right? Like, what are you going to do?
And it's not just office productivity software, although that's very important. It's also hardware. So you remember when those John Deere tractors were stolen from Ukraine and ended up in Chechnya by like Putin's thugs, John Deere kill switched them remotely. They can brick any tractor in the world. So like, again, Trump doesn't even have to shut down all the ministries and companies in Denmark. He can just brick all the tractors in Denmark, right? So there's this like urgent need to get your data out of these silos and to jailbreak the firmware locks on these devices, and also to create like compatibility layers between conflicting services, right? If you're the EU, like the EU has built its own Blue Sky server, but like maybe they'll poach some people off of Blue Sky. They're not going to get people who are stuck on Twitter and Instagram because they're stuck there because like they have a rare disease and that's where the people who have the same rare disease as them are, or because like they moved from another country and that's where their family is, or, it's where their customers are, or their audience or whatever. But like when Facebook started, they solved this by giving everyone a MySpace scraper that you gave your MySpace credentials to, and it scraped everything waiting for you on MySpace and put it in your Facebook feed so you could eat your cake and have it too. You could still talk to your friends on MySpace, but use Facebook to do it. It's very like Prodigy AOL-ass nonsense that you have to care which network someone's on to talk to them, right? So you can make that app, right? All of that stuff is possible if you get rid of anti-circumvention law. So AI. When you talk about digital sovereignty, it's almost always an argument about how we build AI in our country.
Right.
I was just on a panel in Toronto where 5 of us, 4 of them were like, how do we build national AI? And I was like, guys, if Trump orders Dario and Sam to switch off all your chatbots tomorrow, not one firm fails, not one ministry shuts down. Kids have to do their own homework. Who gives a shit? Whereas if Trump bricks our tractors because we won't give him Alberta, or he shuts down all of our ministries and structurally important firms and households, he bricks all of our phones, right? Like that's it. Canada is like in the Stone Age, right? Because like, yes, we could do all that stuff analog, but not right now. And we couldn't rebuild it without those digital tools to coordinate the rebuilding of something else. That is a digital sovereignty emergency. Meanwhile, we can see the writing on the wall with AI. Like the AI bubble is going to burst. If you really do want AI, like don't buy at the top of the market. Wait until the shit is 10 cents on the dollar.
Right.
Right. And if you build like digital public goods internationally using like to help everyone escape the American internet and build a post-American internet, well, then you'll have all the skills and kind of networks and procedures for building digital public goods in the form of AI, should you decide such a thing is important.
Yeah, there's been a big uptick in engineers who have this sort of hero fantasy where they go, at the end of the AI thing, I'm going to make a lot of money cleaning this up. And I'm like, firstly, you're not. All the people that are pretending to sell good AI products are now going to pretend to be cleanup crew. And secondly, like half these companies are fucking gone, right? Like there's going to be nothing to clean up. They'll have no money. They want to be sold for parts because the parts won't be worth anything. Like there's not a lot because there's no fallout, right? If someone turns off the chatbot feature in Outlook, companies are not going to go, wow, we need someone to fix this. They're going to go, wow, I don't know if anyone was using that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of, though, right? Back to this idea that the AI can't do your job, but your boss is infinitely horny for replacing you with a chatbot. I think we're going to take people who do real jobs. We're going to fire them. We're going to replace them with chatbots that can't do their job. And so they'll do a half-ass shitty job of doing their job. But the people we fire are going to become discouraged. They're going to retrain. They're going to exit the job market. They won't be reassemblable when the chatbots all get switched off. And then we shut off the chatbots. And then we just have a void where, like, take functions we should never give to a chatbots, but we're doing anyway, like deciding whose children get taken away by the state, right? Taking children away from parents who are abusive is a regrettably important thing that the state needs to do. It's a significant function of the state. And if we fire all the people who know how to do that job, which is a hard job that already the state doesn't do well, and we replace them with chatbots, and then the chatbots go away, we still have this pressing need to protect children who are in abusive households. And the people who know how to do it are not available anymore. And the chatbot that was supposed to do it has been switched off because the data center went bust. And now what? Right? That's my concern.
So we've already seen that happen, right? Quite a few industries during COVID. I'm thinking of the airline industry in particular. I know there were massive difficulties because a bunch of people got laid off.
Yeah.
And then they went, well, actually, fuck this. Like I can't take care of my family here. I need to retrain into something else. Even right now, software engineers are pretty privileged and the skills hold for a long time. But I know a lot of people that have been laid off for AI nonsense. And, the engineer to electrician pipeline it's real. They just go, I'm going to go do something a chatbot can't do.
And then there's the kind of the process knowledge, right, which I think is very systematically undervalued. And again, this ties into AI. So I'm sure you're familiar with this idea of process knowledge as opposed to IP, right? That's sometimes called tacit knowledge. But
yeah.
I think tacit knowledge is mostly an individual matter, whereas process knowledge tends to be spread out across individuals within divisions, across divisions within a firm, across firms within a sector, both vertically and horizontally.
Right.
And that process knowledge, it's like, if you can write it down and put it in a filing cabinet, it's not process knowledge, it's IP, which is to say that if it's a thing you can train a chatbot on, it's not process knowledge. And if it's process knowledge, you can't train a chatbot on it because it's all tacit. It doesn't exist in a form that can be fed to AI. And process knowledge is systematically undervalued by markets and firms because it's not commodifiable, right? So it never shows up on a balance sheet. But process knowledge is so important that we have the work to rule, which is when workers show up for work and only do what the IP says and don't employ any process knowledge. And then firms just shut down, right? If all you do is follow procedures, where you wrote in your piece that firms are very bad at writing down the procedures, in part because there's parts of the procedures that cannot be embodied. They're like super contingent. They're what the Germans call Fingerspitzengefühl, the fingertip feeling, and it's literally things like, I apprentice, so I know with the pace at which feedstock goes in this machine based on a whole bunch of feedback that's coming from the machine. I can hear it, I can feel it. But I also know, because I have process knowledge, that when the machine jams and the person who can fix it is off, the person who trained me, who retired last year, will do it for £100. And here's his mobile number.
Right.
And that's the difference between the line shutting down and not shutting down. And my favorite example of recent process knowledge is there was someone at a chip fab where a whole ton of chips failed QA. And they only ran at like 50% of their nominal clock speed. But they knew they had a downstream customer where there was a faction within the firm that had been briefing for making lower end computers. And they called them up and they said, what if I could give you a ton of chips for like cheap? And they said, yeah, I think I can sell this new product line, which is called the MacBook Neo. And it's the most successful product Apple has launched in 10 years.
Right.
And it's so successful, they used up all the shitty chips and they're now making shitty chips for new MacBook Neos. Right. Like that stuff is just that when you vaporize that, it doesn't come back. Right. It has to be rebuilt through like hard yards, right? You have to make like the machine has to break down over and over again. And you have to call in repair people and have like days-long shutdowns of the factory while you wait for the machine to get fixed before you figure out the Fingerspitzengefühl, the fingertip feeling of how to load the machine, and before you get the phone number of the person who fixed it the first time but then quit, but who will come in and do it for $100. And that's the thing that keeps the system running.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common failure for because we're a data
Yeah.
consultancy that's specifically focused on something called extreme programming, which
Sure.
I'll skip a lot of the details.
I
But
know extreme programming.
yeah, cool. So we're an
Yeah.
XP shop. And that means like a lot of the thing we do at a company is we just sit down with people. Like they'll hire Deloitte, and Deloitte will go into a meeting and do presentations. But we'll just get the ground staff and we'll go, so what does this look like when it's not in the PowerPoint?
Right.
We still haven't seen a PowerPoint that looks like what the actual process is. There's a lot of, well, you do all of this and then you send it to John. And they go, what does John do? No one actually knows what John does apart from John. But all we know is if we don't send him the numbers, like it comes out wrong every time.
Right.
And you talk to John and it's like this complex system of I talk to this regulator and then I check this number and I confirm with Michael that it looks okay. And frequently at these organizations, they don't seem to realize they're like two guys quitting away from some sort of pretty major crisis. I know at least one financial institute in Australia that has exactly one man who has the password to a system. And that system has a bunch of encrypted data from a massive data breach. It's the list of customers who were affected. And I was talking to him. I was going, so where do they keep the password? And he goes, I just know it. There was an emergency 5 years ago, so I wrote the password down. And I went, and what happens if you leave? He's like, I don't know. I guess they'd have to call me to unlock it. But, it's just, I don't know if I'll be around. I was thinking of moving to Germany.
And what if you get hit by a bus, right? Yeah, this is everybody has this problem, right? Like, this is not unique to large firms. All of us have inadequate plans for contingencies, right? And it's just like, even if you document everything and think through all the contingencies, 10 days goes by and new potential contingencies emerge because of exogenous factors. And so this is why, if you've got a plant, we're actually going through this. I live in a flat on top of a low-rise office building in East London. And we have an insane system in the UK called freeholding, where the building is actually owned. It's not a condo association. It's like a private company that bought the title to the land from an aristocrat, and they own the skin of the building. And we have statutorily defined 999-year leases in it. And it's just insane.
Fascinating.
But they're responsible for fire safety. And also they sold our second fire stairwell to the neighbors so they could expand their buildings. So now we only have one stairwell to leave by. So there's just all this insane kind of stuff that happens, so that even if if my family, if we had a plan for getting out of the flat, if it catches fire, that plan goes away the minute the freeholder takes away our second fire escape. And so it has to just be continuously adjusted.
Well, to jump back to something you were talking about earlier, we were talking about the sort of coordinated attack against certain digital freedoms.
Yeah.
We were talking about the, can you remember what it's called? It was the
Anti-circumvention
laws. Thank you. So, that sounds like a pretty sophisticated and coordinated attack to capture part of the market. I have a lot of trouble reconciling that with how fucking stupid some of the people I meet are. It is difficult to imagine some of the people I dislike putting this together, because they have difficulty with ideas like maybe people at my company know things.
Right.
What are we talking about? Two different groups of people? Or
here's the way to understand this. So there's a bunch of criminology about how this law got enacted and then how it got spread. So that in the early 90s, Clinton decided to demilitarize the U.S. internet. Depending on who you ask, someone like Ben Tarnoff would say he wanted to privatize it. It's also true. I think that calling it privatization implies that before that it was mostly a public-spirited project of the U.S. government, and it was actually mostly a military project, of the American government, with some academic stuff around the periphery. So privatization, demilitarization, tomato. Al Gore was in charge of this. They called it the National Information Infrastructure Project, but more colloquially, you'll know it as the Information Superhighway. You remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. So Clinton's IP czar was this guy called Bruce Lehman, who pitched Gore on anti-circumvention. And Gore told him to fuck off because he thought it sounded stupid. And so Lehman, the IP czar, went to the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is a UN specialized agency that started as an industry consortium. I think it's the only UN agency that was an industry consortium that then became a UN agency. So they're the most corporate, even, the ITU do the phone stuff. They're the most corporate of all the UN agencies, the most captured, the most capturable, not least because like the majority of votes in a UN agency come from the Global South, but the majority of delegates that the Global South nation sends to Geneva are not going to be experts in IP law, right? They're like water experts and children's health experts and whatever,
Sure.
right? So they're easily misled by these industry reps who show up there. It's funny, like an NGO at the UN is pharma. And the Motion Picture Association, those are classed as NGOs. So when you're like in a UN meeting, I used to be a WIPO delegate. When you're in a UN meeting, like the NGO section has got the rep from pharma in it. It is wild, bizarro world nonsense.
That is baffling.
Well, they're structured as a nonprofit, right? So like, yeah, they're a nonprofit. They're not governmental. What are they? They're an NGO, right? So these NGOs just led them by the nose into creating a treaty obligation under the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Phonograms and Performers Treaty that's actually weaker than the laws, but it's a similar treaty obligation. Then Bruce Lehman went back to America, and in a move he is publicly described as doing an end run around Congress, he told congressmen that they now had an obligation to pass a much more extreme version of the law, the one he'd originally pitched to Al Gore, that not even the UN would make a treaty obligation. Mm-hmm. And then they passed the DMCA in 1998, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Section 1201 establishes a felony punishable by a $500,000 fine and a 5-year prison sentence for jailbreaking locked devices.
Holy shit.
Irrespective of whether it's for a lawful purpose or not.
That is a hefty fine.
Oh, yeah. And then the U.S. Trade Representative made it the number one trading priority of the U.S. all around the world. So I used to, before Orban, I used to sometimes lecture in the summer program at Central European University in Budapest. And this was like a doctoral program in international relations. And a lot of the students were ex-government ministers and officials who had been politicians, but wanted to understand governance better and wanted to do a doctorate in this. So one of my students one year at one of these lectures where I was talking about this was someone who had been the information minister of a Central American country during the Central American Free Trade Agreement negotiations, CAFTA. And they came to me afterwards and they said, I want to tell you about how CAFTA got negotiated because I told our rep, do not give the Americans anti-circumvention under any circumstances. And I got a phone call saying, we are in the negotiating room. The Americans say that we cannot export coffee to them unless we give them anti-circumvention. And that's our whole export economy. So you lose.
Yeah.
Right. That's how we got it. So then we have this. So this is the ground state, right? So now we have this kind of gravity that attracts assholes who want to make it illegal to change how your technology works so that they can fuck you, right? And that force of gravity acts on the stupidest and worst people in the world who learn through experience, through intuition, through consultations with asshole lawyers. Look, if you sell, like there's a bassinet called the snoo, and the bassinet has like a thing that when your kid cries, wakes up in the night and tries to rock them to sleep. And so the guy who runs the snoo has sold some bassinets, and now he wants to extract more revenue from them. And somewhere he gets the idea that he can push a firmware update that disables it after it changes hands. So if you sell your used snoo, you have to then buy a subscription. And if you've got your snoo and you want to use it for your next kid, you have to buy a subscription. So this is like the Darth Vader MBA. I'm altering the deal, pray I don't alter it further. And this guy does not have to be smart. He just has to be greedy in a world where greed is rewarded and not punished. And so like, that's what we've done, right? We've established, this is like my whole enshittification thesis is that enshittification is not the result of individual greed of tech executives. It is the product of an enshittigenic policy environment that makes the worst ideas of the worst people the most profitable. And so you don't have to be smart. You just have to be ruthless.
That makes a lot of sense. So basically, you just need someone relatively intelligent to kick off, whatever the new norm is.
You need a Bruce Lehman.
Right.
And then everything follows from there.
You need an intelligent sociopath. Yeah. And then you just need a bunch of people who can learn by social script, which probably explains why so many of these people are, it sounds like you've met a lot of executives. So you've probably met like median executive. I know some ones I really like for the most part, right? Like I know some cool people, but I will say that typical executive I meet just bulldozes people. Like they're just bullies. And I frequently see them deploy this in context. You see them doing it at work and you go, well, is this like a clever strategy? and then you'll see them yell at a 6-year-old, and you're like, oh, you can't turn it off. Like, this was not
sure.
You're yeah.
Although I'll tell you my favorite counterexample. There's a great speech by Yochai Benkler, who's the guy who wrote Kosa's Penguin, and started to talk about free software, like where free software fit into these ideas of organizational theory and so on. It's a great writer, lawyer, and thinker who talks about the fact that although, Homo economicus is like a bedrock of the neoclassical economics, and it's an assumption we make about how everyone operates, that everyone's always maximizing their own utility, that like no one wants to actually live that way in their personal life. And he describes going down Wall Street to a playground where stockbrokers had brought their children to play, and they're standing on the edge, talking on phones, doing deals, but periodically looking over at their kids and going, Timmy, share, because you don't want to live with a kid who acts like that in like life, because no one can fucking do that. That would like you kill your children and then yourself if that was how your family lived.
It's honestly, the first time I met Ed, he was asking me how many executives get in power. This is pretty early in the AI bubble. I think it's 2 years ago. Oh, you would have read this. I will pile drive you if you mention AI again.
Sure.
And he went, well, how is this working? If it's, we're still early in this thing and people have no real reason to go along with this. And I went, because they're dicks. You're there at 10 a.m. and you just want to get through the day. And someone goes, well, if you don't let me get this chatbot right now, I'm going straight to the CEO. I'm going to make a huge deal out of it. He's not going to understand shit, but he's going to be mad at you because I'm the first person who complained. And everyone just sort of went, all right, fine, you can have the chatbot. I'm not paid enough to deal with this. And 2 years later, we're sitting here going, Christ, I wish I hadn't given you the chatbot. Like, look what we've... It's gotten so far out of control.
I also want to suggest to you that consolidation in a sector produces the circumstance where within a firm, the major competitor for any executive is another executive within that firm. So it creates a kind of autoimmune disorder, right? Where like, if you think about a Fortune 100, where you've got like directors, VPs, EVPs, SVP, or SVPs, EVPs, presidents, CEO, like that's a typical studio structure. Other companies have different ranks, but there's something like an order of magnitude difference in lifetime earning expectation between each of those tiers. And also it's a very steep pyramid. And so it's dead man's shoes, right? You don't move up unless someone gets fired or promoted or dies. And so if there's a new thing, right, that might be the next thing, right? Like if AI might be the next thing for your firm, if you think about like the tech sector's successors, right? Where like Microsoft's successor was the guy who figured out cloud for them. Apple's successor was the guy who figured out logistics and Chinese contract manufacturing for them. And Google's successor was also a cloud guy, right? So the person who brought them into the next multi-billion-dollar sector, everyone in their patronage network moves one step and one order of magnitude up the lifetime earning expectation on this steeply canted pyramid, which means that when there is anything that might be that thing, everyone starts to, on the one hand, jockey to become the person who runs that, but quietly, because if the other execs think that you're going to make the move, then their patronage network all start to rat fuck all of your vassals in order to destroy them, in order to weaken your power base, because they don't know who should do this. They know it shouldn't be you, because if it's you, it's not their boss.
Yeah.
And then their lifetime chance of an order of magnitude lift and lifetime earning expectation goes down. One of the things I'm at great pains to do right now is to get leftists to stop saying endless growth is the ideology of a tumor, because I don't think this is ideological. I think this is totally material. Right. I think that like this is not just people are greedy for like no reason. Right. Like 10xing your lifetime's earnings expectation in a highly financialized economy with a weak social safety network is the chance to permanently attain a kind of dynastic family in which you can be sure that your kids can go to university and have a house and not have medical debt and you have a pension. Right. Which is like those are increasingly aspirational goals, to get all of those. Right. In one generational transfer. That was normal for the what the French call the 30 glorious years after the war. And now that's like top decile and above economic aspirations. Those are material goals, right? It's not ideological to say, I want to have a decent retirement. I want my kid to have somewhere to live, and I don't want my kid to be saddled with debt for their entire life because of their university degree. Those are absolutely material goals.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it manifests a little bit less frequently in engineers because we're still basically at the earning level where if we get fired, we can hop into another role.
Sure.
But I do know a lot of, director tier people at places like hospitals. And when they get drummed out of the hospital, like that's it. They're back to the unwashed messes. Like they don't have a skill to apply that will allow them to go back out and go, I would like another $300,000 next year. People just go, well, you have no supporters. No one works here who knows you. Like,
where's your patronage?
Why would we let you in? Yeah. I will say on top of all that, though, I've seen the dynamic you're describing play out. I haven't thought about it that much because I think frequently the people in it are operating on pure lizard brain. Yeah, I don't think they necessarily plot everything out. Just some little bit of their subconscious goes, it would be very bad if I didn't climb this ladder.
I would have to say things that would identify my sources to say more, but I know for a fact that there are people within the patronage networks of important executives at large firms who explicitly view their tenure and their career in these terms and act accordingly. Like this is just the way that they understand the lay of the land.
Yeah. Have you ever read Moral Mazes by I think it's Robert? It's either Jackal or Jackal. I don't know how to pronounce this. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not. I know the book. There's a radio program on the BBC called The Moral Maze that I think was inspired by it.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because the companies he landed at, the people inside clearly had a very heightened awareness of the dynamics you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I think it is more prevalent in some industries. Like, the players I meet in the state government are not switched on in this way. The partners I meet at law firms, I think, very much are. There's a sort of, yeah. And it's, it's scary to deal with people like that. We try to avoid them at our company because at our small scale, like no good can come of it. We just don't want to wake up on a Monday and have a contract get knifed because it was slightly inconvenient aspirationally, like it's bad business.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's, Brandeis wrote about the curse of bigness, right? One of the great antitrust jurists. And I believe briefly the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court wrote about the curse of bigness and just this sense that you not only have these like Coasian coordination problems when firms get very large, but you also have like this political problem, which is like it's real and non-ideological, that like the locus of competition becomes internal when a firm dominates a sector or when the number of firms in the sector dwindles to a very small number. You get a lot of internal competition that displaces the external competition. And, when you read like the moral philosophers of markets, the people, Ricardo and Smith and so on, hardly, socialists, they're the ones who say that the way that firms and markets produce public benefit and the reason we should have them is that competition makes them strive to provide better goods and services to the public. But internal competition does not do that. Internal competition is all about like a firm that knows that its position is cemented. It's too big to care. It's the only game in town. And so now it's about who dominates the firm by dominating its politics rather than who dominates the market by producing the best goods and services at the best prices or attracts the best talent. And I do think that this is where I think there is an ideological component, because I think tech workers, were in very short supply. The Silicon Valley engineer on average adds about $1 million to their employer's bottom line. There weren't enough of them. And their bosses had to pretend to like them. And they had to pretend to be co-equal, right? And, I think a lot of tech workers, despite the cliche of the tech bro, I think a lot of tech workers' path into tech was having their lives dramatically improved by exposure to networked computers, where like they found communities and words to describe themselves and ideas that allowed them to transcend the circumstances of their birth and what they thought the limitations of their life would be. And a lot of people really want everyone else to have that. I call them Tron pilled because they want to fight for the user. And you know these people, right? You meet someone who runs Linux on the desktop and try and make them stop talking about their computer. It's very hard because they want you to experience the benefit they're experiencing. I am that guy.
Yeah.
And so those workers are very exploitable. And I think their bosses kind of tricked them into thinking that they weren't workers. They tricked them into thinking that they were temporarily embarrassed entrepreneurs because everyone wears a hoodie. You and Mark Zuckerberg both wear a hoodie. And you get to go to the meeting where like it's an all hands meeting and you can tell him you think his tech ideas are stupid and his business ideas are stupid. And he like goes, yeah, I'll take that under consideration. And like you don't get immediately fired for insubordination. But secretly, bosses were seething about this. They fucking hated it. And, you know, when you look at the Google layoffs, that 12,000 person layoff that followed their $80 billion stock buyback that would have paid those wages for 27 years, they preferentially fired senior mouthy engineers, right? Like they were like going after the people who were a pain in the ass because they knew how everything worked and they had a power base. People looked up to them. They remembered a time when Google was more responsive to its workers. And I think this is why tech bosses love AI chatbots that do coding, because like it's a way to put the fear of God into mouthy, entitled programmers.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch because there's a specific thing I've seen multiple times, which is some sort of director or above comes into the office and they put this big message up and they go, over the weekend, I made a to-do list using Claude Code. Why can't we all be this productive all the time? And, you know, implicit in that is this sort of idea like, you fucking morons couldn't figure this out. You know, this I just did it in one evening. Do you need me to tell you to use the robot? And you know, everyone's sort of sitting there going, yeah, that's a great point, boss. And then they leave and they approach me and they go, what does he think I fucking do all day? Like, this is my job. I do this 40 hours a week. I went to university but you know, they just have to suck it up.
The thing is that there's a lot of stuff that's very easy to build if you only care how it works and don't care how it fails. And so if you're not worried about maintenance, if you're not worried about dependencies, if you're not worried about edge cases, if you're not worried about scalability, if you're not worried about security, you can make the to-do list app in a weekend.
Right.
Right. And if you have to care about all of those things, suddenly it's very hard. Look, I actually think so. One of the things that I've always championed as a technologist is no code, low code tools. I think Visual Basic, HyperCard, Scratch. I think these are amazing, and not just as learning tools, although they are very good learning tools. They're a nice, smooth, gradient into a series of more advanced programming challenges and more advanced programming knowledge. But I like them as ends unto themselves because I think that there is a limit to the fidelity with which requirements can be transmitted from practitioners to coders.
Yeah, of
and
course.
that the requirements document is never going to fully capture the needs of the person at the coalface. And when we're talking about especially personal needs, you know, there's this motto of the disability movement is nothing about us without us, right? Like don't try and solve a disability problem without consulting disabled people. But, you know, that motto goes back to the 16th century. It goes back to the Polish dukes who did the Poland's version of the Magna Carta, which was just like to the king, don't change the way the country works without talking to the people who have to run the outlying provinces. I think broadly, like people should have self-determination. And in software, the way you have self-determination is by producing code. And I actually don't see any problem if you have like a chatbot running on your computer that's not consuming the world's water and energy that you use to vibe code a thing that solves a problem you have. And it breaks in 6 weeks and then you vibe code another one. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, sure.
I think the problem is when you make that into something everyone uses, right? Then like you turn it into a product without thinking about security, scalability, maintainability, and so on, and you expose other people to risk. And this is the thing that I think bosses miss when they walk in on Monday morning and say, here's the app I vibe coded on the weekend. What are you assholes doing?
Yeah, one of my favorite things is every time I get linked to any vibe coded startup, I try to make an account, and 50% of them you literally can't. Like this, the login flow does not work. And that has been, and I know Ed's very critical of Replit, but you know, like none of these things actually work, which is interesting because I expected them to fail deep in the technical internals, right? Like you make the account because that's easy. Like there's so many examples of like correct login flow to copy from. I thought you'd get in and then like 6 months later, your stuff disappears and you go, something was wrong with some retention policy in an S3 bucket. But it's literally at the point where you click login and it doesn't work. And the guy who runs it hasn't noticed because he doesn't even have the domain knowledge to understand things like, oh, you should try logging in more than one time. Like just because it worked doesn't mean it works for every person on every computer. Like that's just so far.
Try creating an account with an email address that doesn't end in com, edu, net, or org, right?
Yeah,
I mean, whatever, right?
Like right now we're recording on Riverside, and every time I go on a podcast, they have to go like, hey, remember to use a Chrome browser. It's just not going to work on the others.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Firefox user. I keep a version of Chrome in a sandbox specifically for Riverside, and the other one starts with an H. Oh, and Squadcast too. But there's the one Trash Future uses. I forget what it's called. Starts with an H.
But yeah, and do they think that we didn't get this working on Firefox for fun? Like, it's super hard. It's actually complicated.
It turns out that WebKit and I forget what the rendering engine, WebKit and Gecko and whatever the rendering engine for Chrome are very different. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just go like, Claude, knock this out for me, or we would have done it.
Yeah.
So something I did want to talk about was, this has just baffled me. I was talking to Jathan about it this morning. So we've seen a huge uptick in executives bragging about their AI productivity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is, like the CEO of Spotify was talking about merging. I'm making the number up, but I'm pretty sure it said it was hundreds of pull requests per week, just some absurd number. I am really curious as to, like Spotify has not noticeably changed in any way. Like, if you asked me what's changed in the past 2 years, I'd go, if you held a gun to my head and said, what did those pull requests change? I'd probably die. I could not tell you, right? Sure. It's going to be like a button moved 1 pixel to the left. I don't know. What do you think motivated that statement? Because, my thesis in the article was I've seen a bunch of actual mania, right? I've seen some people, for instance, I know at GitHub, they have like 4 AI buttons on the front page. And a pretty senior engineer at GitHub recently told me, when I was talking about this, he went, yeah, no, our executives are basically as mercilessly cutthroat as, any executive anywhere, very much talking about what you've been describing, which is just a bunch of people trying to knife each other to be the AI guy. And if no one's the AI guy, it doesn't matter. They're not going to get fired, right? Just no one moves up the hierarchy. But I have met a certain number of people who are not quite undergoing like AI psychosis, like someone like Steve Yege, if you're familiar with him. Like not actively undergoing some sort of like pretty public mental health episode. I just mean someone who's really excited and seems to actually believe something is happening with the product. Like, do you have any theory of mind for the guy that turns up and goes, I've done 1,000 PRs a week, and doesn't think he's going to be embarrassed when someone goes like, but what do they do? Like, what if, do you know how many 1,000 is?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very number go up-ish kind of phenomenon where, like, there's Goodhart's law.
Yeah.
That, metrics become targets, right? Like, if you don't care about the quality of the PR, you can make a lot more PRs. We saw this early with a lot of GitHub projects and other like Git hosted projects, not just on GitHub, but GitLab and whatever, where people got really excited about AI, not just execs, but just like junior coders. And we're like, there's a project with 10 outstanding bugs. I'm gonna fix all 10 of them with my chatbot, and I'm gonna like be the most bug fixing son of a bitch on this little corner of open source land.
Right.
And I think like I don't know. I think it's just like it's back to like not caring how things break, but how they work. If you can just like satisfy a unit test or whatever, or if you can build, and you don't really have the discernment to distinguish between, I guess that's it. It's the discernment to distinguish between a good bug fix and a bad bug fix. It's especially pernicious if you think other people aren't real and what they do is nonsense and that, not as hard as what you do. Because then you look at it and you're like, oh, well, that was easy. I guess that person is as much of an idiot as I thought they were, because you don't understand what they do. But also, like, you just lack discernment. I actually think this is a deep problem with the AI story about AI displacing labor. Like you, I'm less dismissive than Ed about whether AI is useful. But I think that AI is primarily useful to skilled practitioners who make thoughtful judgments about when and how to integrate it into their workflow, because they have the discernment to distinguish good AI output from bad AI output. And they have the self-knowledge to know the pace at which they can make those fine distinctions, because oftentimes, because AI is doing statistical extrapolation from things that work, the things that break that AI makes are often as statistically close to a thing that would work as it's possible to be without actually working. And so it's really, really hard to spot those bugs. And so while I know some extremely talented programmers, in fact, some of the most talented programmers I know who are using really extensive AI tools to write code that they swear blind is very good. My favorite example here is a guy called Patrick Ball, who founded a thing called the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, and hrdag.org. They have decades of experience using advanced statistical technique to describe the parts of war crimes that have been obscured from the record, using the parts that are visible for human rights tribunals, truth and reconciliation, and war crimes trials. And they're now using a lot of AI tools to build this stuff. And in fact, they announced yesterday they've launched a thing called the Tech Freedom Coalition or something. I forget what it's called. Tech Liberty Coalition. That's basically a consortium that's building federated data centers outside of the US for both like office style productivity suites, but also local open source AI models that are reproducible and testable. And they're also training other NGOs how to do large scale data analysis using this hardware and this software in a way that's very robust. And the thing is that Patrick has a ton of discernment, right? Like he is someone who has a lifetime career at the top of his field in making extremely highly consequential software outputs that then have to be defended in court in The Hague and in Truth and Reconciliation tribunals in order to put genocidaires into prison, right? Like he's really careful, right? And so when he tells me, oh, I figured out how to use chatbots that help me write this code, right? Or that help me process documents. One of the things HRDAG has done is partner with Innocence Project New Orleans, and they've taken the arrest reports of people they've successfully exonerated, found the linguistic correlates of a successful exoneration, and used that to sort all the arrest reports they have in Louisiana to put the ones that are most similar to successful exonerations at the top so that lawyers can review them, right? Like I look at that and I'm like, if you tell me that works, right? If the lawyers are saying I am finding good exonerations in there, I'm not going to say, well, AI is bullshit, you're wrong, right? I'm going to say like, yeah, people with discernment using AI can do it. But here's the paradox. It means that you can't just have a bunch of junior people fire the senior people and ask the junior people to mark the AI's homework. And if you have senior people, they're going to tell you, I can't mark the AI's homework at speed, right? Like I need to use the AI in certain ways that will make my outputs better, but won't necessarily increase my throughput. That's the historic dynamic of adoption of automation, that labor-driven automation adoption is quality-based and capital-driven automation is throughput-based. And so I can totally see a quality-based automation adoption story for AI over the next 10, 15 years where we look back and we're like, okay, here's where it works, but not quantity. And the place where it's very visible is education, because like if you need discernment to distinguish good AI output from bad, you cannot use AI to learn things.
Right.
You can't ask an AI to explain history that you're not familiar with to you or math that you don't know how to do to you, right?
Because
you don't know when it's wrong.
I have a horrifying story about this.
Yeah.
So RMIT, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, is the biggest in terms of undergraduates university here in Victoria, maybe Australia actually. And one of my younger cousins was studying software engineering there. His first year, I think he's moved to a different university now. But he came to my house and he went, "Hey, I've got this really, really hard assignment, and I am 18 years old. I do not know how to tackle this. I don't know what Java is." And I took a look at the material, and it was like really, really bad. It was not suitable for an 18-year-old to tackle. But it's been like that for years. The students just sort of grit their teeth and get a little bit traumatized, and they find a way through it. But it's a group assignment. And he goes, "Well, you're a professional software engineer. Could you please help me explain it to me?" And it's a group assignment. He shows me the rest of the code. And I go, wow, like this is obviously like 10,000 lines of LLM generated Java. And you didn't do this, your group mate did it. And I went, it's not great, but I went, I'm very impressed by your group mate, right? Like being able to prompt the thing to get this. I wouldn't put like, if someone is a company, I'd still fire them. But I went, this is really good for an 18-year-old, right? This would get you an A in the assignment.
Sure.
And I work with him through the next couple of days. Turns out everyone in the course is just using their parents' corporate ChatGPT subscription. Like that's how they get the app done. But we get to the final day, and I'm like, I think this is ready to go, man. Like you can submit it. I'd love to talk to your group mate. Like if he did all of this, like I know some people he should talk to. And he goes, oh, it turns out it wasn't him. He got his uncle to pilot the LLM, who's also a professional software engineer. So it's just a bunch of guys from
terrible.
age 30 to 50. Yeah, it's just, I guess that's what's happening, right? Like,
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the discernment popped up immediately. I didn't even think it was good. I just went, oh, an 18-year-old didn't do this. There's no way.
So to give you an example of how automation in education could improve quality without improving throughput, my daughter went through the American secondary school system in Los Angeles. She went to a big, dumb American high school. It's actually the school they based Glee on. It is like a very like American high school. You know, they have a homecoming football game.
Cool.
And totally outside of my experience. I went to a weird alternative school in Toronto where the only sports team we had was an improv team. But she did the math, right? She did like higher math, and she was never allowed to take home her math quizzes or tests or exams because there was only one test, because they have to teach certain concepts in a certain order, because it ends up with standardized tests with SATs and AP classes and so on. So the profs the teachers are extremely constrained in what they can teach. And so writing something that is this pernickety, a test that's this pernickety, it's a lot of work. So they have one and they don't want the answers leaking out. So you write your quiz, but you don't get to see, like, you can review it in class, but you don't get to take it home to review the mistakes you've made. This is fucking batshit, right? My dad was a math teacher. Like, you cannot teach math this way. This is like teaching target shooting by making you shoot and then like blindfolding you before you see where the bullets go in. You know, like it's
right.
It's nuts. So I could totally see a teacher vibe coding some Python that spits out tests and answer keys for every exam that go to those specific concepts and like use, you know, different variables or numbers or whatever. It'd be very easy to write a unit test that like validates it. I could see them actually just like making a prompt that produces, again, like you'd want them to actually work backwards and make sure that the questions are real and that they solve the way that they think they're doing. But that's the thing, that if you have discernment, you can just look at it and you can tell, right? You just work the problem. So that would be a thing that would significantly improve the quality of the education. That teacher couldn't teach more students. They couldn't teach students faster. They would just be doing better teaching because they'd have access to some automation. Now, we started this by saying AI is being used to solve AI is being used to make things worse in places where they already suck. And like the fact that math education and education more broadly is so regimented in the American context is in fact the problem, right? So this is just a Band-Aid, right? The actual problem is regimentation and, you know, the inability of teachers to have small enough groups and enough flexibility that in their professional judgment, they can observe students who are getting the bit in their teeth for a certain concept or a certain discipline and give them the rein to tackle that. You know, I always think about my second grade class where, you know, in Canada, when you come in the winter, there's like a 10-minute period where everyone takes off their snow gear before the class starts. And during that 10-minute period, my teacher saw me take down a copy of Alice in Wonderland off the bookshelf and sit down and start reading it. It was the first book I'd ever read to myself. And she looked over at me and made a judgment call and said, I'm just going to leave him. And I spent the next 2 days just on my own in the back of the class reading this book. You know, I was 7, I'm 55 now. I've written more than 30 books since, many of them international bestsellers and award winners. And I married a woman called Alice, right? She made the right call, but she couldn't have made that call if there was a standardized test 24 months later where I would have to be able to do fractions or something, right? Like she understood that we were trading one, you know, set of instruction hours for another and that we would have to make it up later. But it was because she had, again, just like a regular public school, but in a different era in the 70s, she had both the professional flexibility and the small enough class size that she could make that call. It was hugely important. So AI might like make teaching regimented material better, but it doesn't solve regimentation.
Yeah, you know, so I'm pretty atypical as a success story for a Malaysian, right? Like not many people fly out to Australia from there and get a highly paid software engineering job and all that stuff. And I've been written about this in the blog before, but I was partially saved from that because I actually went 6 years without an education because I got put into a local school which taught exactly the way you're talking about. And because I didn't speak Malay, my parents didn't teach me. the teacher just left me alone for 6 years with books.
Oh, wow.
And like that is grossly irresponsible, right? They should not have done that. But Malaysian teachers, it's not like Australia or the US where they have a master's degree in education.
Right.
It's frequently like just some guy who left a village,
right,
2 years ago, and they went, this is slightly more than working at McDonald's, go crazy with it. There's 50 students per class.
Wow.
And it turned out just being totally uneducated was better.
Benign neglect.
Yes, benign neglect is how, not just in education, right? I think most managerial control is so, even competently done, is just like inherently harmful because of the modern paradigms around it. Almost every effective team I've seen, even in software, has been created under the condition of benign neglect. It's usually just a guy who's like, well, I'm meant to be the director here, but I don't think anyone will notice if I go fishing every day. So I'm going to go fishing. And then just with, the right sort of alchemy of people who are motivated in the right way and the right juniors, they just sort of become really high performance. I probably shouldn't name a specific company, but there was a company which I really looked up to, and a lot of our advisors come from it. And I was talking to a staff engineer there, and I went, how did you all get so good at this? What was your brilliant management technique? What did the directors do right? And he went, benign neglect. That's actually the first time I heard that phrase. I just went,
really?
They just left us alone, and some of us became really functional, and that was that, right? We just spread it internally. Of course, one of the issues we have with clients who actually allow people to cultivate, those little micro decisions in building a functional system is they're actually really, really successful. And then they sell to someone who doesn't have that mindset. And then they're not good customers anymore, right? So we just have this sort of natural churn of the more effective, the more we like a customer, the less likely they're to stay good forever.
And I would argue that, to bring this back to process knowledge, when you sell a firm, primarily, especially a firm like that, you're selling its IP, but that the process knowledge doesn't necessarily carry over, especially the kind of top tier process knowledge in the executive team who take the buyout and leave, who actually were doing an important job in the smaller, spunkier firm, and who are displaced by managers who can read the memos, read the briefing, and sort through, what everything is supposed to be doing. But because the process knowledge is carried in the minds of the people who've left. And in particularly when we're talking about smaller firms, oftentimes the process knowledge is about idiosyncratic capabilities of different workers within a team who, when it's 10 people in a startup, 15 people in a startup, right? Everybody knows what everyone else can do, and you know who to ask and who not to ask and who you can ask in a pinch. And that's not IP. No one writes that down. You can't train an AI on it. You can't transfer it to the next manager. It's just a thing that you learn through hard-won experience. And it is why it's sometimes hard to make these transitions,
Yeah. And, to go to the whole, to the Fisher-Price steering wheel, I think something interesting is, implicitly most executives, I think they're insecure about it, which is why they frantically want the feeling of, hey, the steering wheel moves the car.
Yeah.
But a lot of the less competent ones, and my friend Luke Caney's, who ran a company called Puppet a long time ago, it's important if you're in a specific IT subdomain. He frequently says, we just don't have that many competent executives. And the most competent ones do tend to read the humanities and sort of, they all know who you are when I talk to my customers, right? They're excited when I said, I'm going to give you a call this evening. That's the kind of person we work with.
Oh, that's nice.
And for a lot of those people, the way they achieve their results is because they read very broadly and they trust their intuition and they trust other people. They will come up with very, very creative innovations within their business. It's not just shove more features in the app. They will sit down with the team and a cup of coffee in a low pressure environment. They might even hire a facilitator they trust, and they will just come up with these great ideas.
Right.
And most executives aren't doing that. And they really only have one thing in their playbook that's not stochastic, which is laying people off and canceling contracts. If someone says drop OPEX 10%, they're looking at the dashboard and they're going, I hit most of these buttons, and deep down, I don't know if they do anything except the fire people button. And I don't that one makes me nervous, and I turn up in the news and people ask me if I know what I'm doing, and I worry I'm going to fire someone that causes an incident next year. And now we have a new button, and it's new. It's labeled AI, so I don't have any scar tissue. And
Right.
I'm sort of just going, please, dear God, let this do something. I just hope this button's real.
Well, and here's the moral hazard of the AI button is the AI button lets you press the lay people off button and claim that you're doing it because you're achieving operational success and not because you're having an operational slowdown.
Yeah. There's been a cooling in Australia in the past couple of weeks. I run all our sales, and people are suddenly a little bit less excited about AI, which surprised me. A lot of readers reached out and said, yeah, suddenly my executives, they still say the things, but they clearly don't mean it as much. They say it like half as much. And it's probably not a coincidence we just closed out a financial year. So I think we just got to run through 6 fun months of telling boards like, hey, we just maxed out on AI. Look at our token spend. And last month they had to go, and how much money did we make? That's a great question. Well, I'm sure we'll make money next year. And yeah, it has been very, very distressing to watch, but also sort of funny. It shouldn't be funny because I assume many people will be hurt when the bubble bursts. But the siren song of "I Told You So" is just so strong, and I think that's where Ed is as well. Every day we go, God, this is going to be funny.
Well, Mike, I mean, I can put it in very stark terms, which is that the thing to understand is that the purpose of a bubble is to separate suckers from their money, right? It's insiders lying about the capabilities of an investment opportunity so that small holder savers will commit to that investment opportunity and let them cash out. And the smallholder savers who are like who are holding the bag on AI, we see this with SpaceX entering the NASDAQ 100 right away.
Are you saying I shouldn't have gone all in on SpaceX? Because
exactly. Right. These are just people who are they're people who would have had a defined benefits pension, final salary pension 30 years ago, and now are expected to buy shares in listed firms. And if they guess wrong, they starve to death and they're homeless when they get old. And so they're terrified and they're trying to make the right bet. And the longer the bubble goes on, the more those people lose their life savings. And that's the thing we should be concerned about. It's let the companies burn, but the collateral damage here is, first of all, anyone who's just suckered in, and second of all, anyone who's not suckered in but did the thing that we've been told to do for 40 years, which is buy an index fund.
Yeah, if you're just remotely in the blast radius, it's going to be brutal down here in Melbourne. People have bought enormous houses because we have such an inflated property market. And when the bubble bursts, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And there's no way they can repay the insane mortgages they've picked up. So
maybe we can talk. I don't know how much longer you have scheduled. I kind of need to run, but maybe we can talk about the other bubbles.
Yeah, sure.
So I lived through the dot-com bubble. I was in San Francisco during the dot-com bubble, and it was quite instructive. So I had always wanted a steel case leap chair, these very good ergonomic chairs.
I know them, yeah.
But there was no way I was going to spend $1,500 on a chair. And I really coveted them because a lot of the people I knew who worked in dot-coms had them. So after the bubble burst, I was walking down a street in the Mission, and I saw a dot-com CEO, and it was those photos from 1929 of millionaires on Wall Street selling apples off the bumper of their Rolls. Except it was a dot-com CEO who lost his lease, who had a fleet of steel case leap chairs in the plastic wrap. And I bought 6 of them for $25 each off of them. And I used them as a dining room set for the next 10 years. And I feel like if you're an Australian policymaker or a firm or a university trying to figure out what your AI strategy is, and you're what we should do is buy AI now, you are buying steel case leap chairs in the early spring, I won't use seasons because of Australians, but in March of 2020 instead of September of 2020, because we can see the crash on the horizon. There's going to be GPUs at 10 cents to the dollar. There's going to be data centers going begging. There's going to be open source models that have plenty of room for optimizations, and there's going to be lots of skilled workers who know how to mobilize them, and don't buy this stuff now. Are you crazy? Why would you buy this stuff now?
Right. Just chill out and pick them up for $2. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
Now, I did have, 3 quick questions.
Sure.
And the first one is, we got a lot of people reading this, and, I've mostly read your writing, and I'm incredibly impressed with how much information you pull off the top of your head. But a lot of your writing is in-depth enough that I assumed that for each piece you sat down for a huge amount of time and had to assemble them. And in this conversation, I realized you probably write pretty extemporaneously, which is it's cool as hell. What would you suggest people read in the space? Obviously, you've got your own book, which you mentioned.
Right. Well, in the space, well, so I would say if you want to learn the method for being able to kind of combine information this way, read a little short essay I wrote called The Memex Method, as in Vannevar Bush's The Memex, which is about how blogging and revisiting your blog posts rather than taking notes for yourself is a very powerful way to mnemonically fix concepts in your mind and then iteratively improve your understanding of them and combine them in novel ways that you kind of create a super saturated solution of fragments that kind of rattle around. And when they nucleate, they crystallize into synthetic ideas and stories for me and novels and so on, but also nonfiction and so on. That this is like, it's a hugely effective method. In terms of like things to read in this domain, I mean,
like what got you started?
Oh, what got
Alice in Wonderland?
Yeah, I mean, what got me started was Alice in Wonderland. Reading science fiction, read Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer. What a book! Just like real kind of magnum opus shit. One book I'm really looking forward to. I don't have the title in front of me, but it's China Mayville's next novel. This is not like how to criticize tech or whatever. This is just amazing book. So China Mayville, another pal of mine, incredible writer, and he's written, like, after 10 years, his 800-page novel that he's been trying to squeeze out for 10 years. And so it's coming out in this autumn. I can't wait to read it. So
that's amazing.
The next China Mayville novel I would recommend. Everyone I know is writing magnum opuses except me. I'm just like writing short books really quickly, but like China did this. There's an incredible book about the origins of the Bund and its contrast with Zionism that was written by Molly Crabapple called Here Where We Live Is Our Country. That again is her magnum opus. Like, everyone's doing them except me. I'm just like writing quick, fast books. Okay. Yeah.
That's
so read the next China Mayville novel. Read Ada Palmer's Inventing the Renaissance, and listen to her amazing music.
And the last two questions are much faster. The first one, which I just came up with, was: were those chairs actually that good? Was it worth the wait?
Oh, the chairs. Yeah, the chairs are great. I don't have one now. I bought when I moved to London, I just bought a gamer chair. But yeah, Steelcase League chairs are the bomb. I have one in LA.
The final question is actually from a pretty well-known, I don't know if you would know him, but he's very well-known amongst like pure software engineers. This guy, Scott Smitelli, who's a friend of mine. He wrote I think you'd really like it. He wrote an essay. He got COVID and he went into a dark cave for 2 weeks. And he spat out this masterpiece called The Ideal Candidate Will Be Punched in the Stomach, which is just, his experience being employed as an engineer at a big firm, which I think you would enjoy.
Good title.
And he had a very important question which will round out the episode. People had like 10 other really good ones, but this was the best one. He wants to know if you think he's smart and pretty. What's the verdict?
Well, I'm going to say your mom thinks you're smart and you're pretty. And that's all that matters.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cory. I really appreciate it, especially with it being the time it is in the UK. Yeah. And I'll catch you around.
All right. Thanks, Nick.